Hello, my friends. It is so good to have you here with me today. Pull up a chair, find a comfortable spot, and let's just take a breath together. Now, imagine for a moment you are standing outside under the open sky. The wind is touching your face. The ground is cold under your feet. There is no door to close. There is no wall to protect you. There is no roof above your head, just you and the wide, open world. Now, think about the place where you live today, your home, your safe, warm, quiet place. How did we get from that open sky to the houses we know now? That is what our story is about today. This is a journey through time, a long and beautiful journey, and it begins thousands and thousands of years ago. So stay with me, listen closely, and let this story carry you gently through the history of houses. A very, very long time ago, there were no houses. There were no buildings at all. The first people on Earth lived under the open sky. They moved from place to place. They followed animals. They looked for food. They had no home to return to. But they needed something. They needed a safe place to sleep at night. The world was full of danger. There were wild animals, cold nights, and heavy rain. So what did these early people do? They looked around them, and they used what nature gave them. Some of them climbed into trees. They made simple beds of branches high above the ground, far away from the dangerous animals below. Others found caves. A cave was like a gift from the earth. It had strong walls of rock. It had a roof that did not fall. It was dark inside, yes, and sometimes cold, but it was safer than sleeping in the open. Then, something very important happened. People learned to use fire. Fire changed everything. With fire, a cave became warm. With fire, the darkness went away. With fire, wild animals stayed far from the entrance. For the first time, people could sit together in safety. They could rest. They could talk. They could feel something new, something that we still feel today when we come home after a long day. They could feel safe. These caves were not houses, not really, but they were the beginning. They were the very first places that people called home. And from this small beginning, a very long story started. A story of discovery, of learning, and of building. But the question is, what happened when there was no cave to find? Sometimes early people traveled to places where there were no caves. There were no mountains, no rocks, no natural shelters. The land was flat and open, so they had to think of something new. And they did. They began to build. This was a very important moment in our story. For the first time, people did not just find shelter, they created it. They used tree branches. They pushed them into the ground in a circle, bent them together at the top, and covered them with leaves, grass, or animal skins. These little huts were simple. They were not strong. The wind could shake them. The rain could come through. But they worked. They kept families together. They gave people a place to sleep, to eat, and to be safe. In colder parts of the world, where the land was covered in ice and snow, people used something very surprising. They used bones. The bones of mammoths, those very large animals that lived long ago. They took the big, heavy bones, the ribs and the tusks, and they built frames with them. Then they covered these frames with animal skins and grass. Inside, they made fires. Can you imagine that? A house made of bones. It sounds strange to us, but for those people, it was smart. It was clever. They used what they had, and it kept them alive through the long, frozen winters. These early huts, whether made of branches or bones, taught people something very powerful. They learned that they did not need to wait for nature to give them a home. They could build one with their own hands. That idea, that simple idea, changed the world. But the biggest change was still coming, and it had everything to do with something growing quietly in the ground. For a very long time, people moved. They walked from place to place, following animals, looking for water, searching for fruit and seeds. They never stayed anywhere for long. Their shelters were temporary, built quickly, and left behind. But then, about 10,000 years ago, something happened that changed the story of houses forever. People learned to farm. They learned to put seeds in the ground and wait for them to grow. They planted wheat. They planted barley. Slowly, carefully, they grew their own food. And because of this, they did not need to move anymore. They could stay. This was the beginning of villages. People settled near rivers and good soil. They built houses that were meant to last, and the material they used was very simple: mud. They took mud from the earth, mixed it with straw and water, shaped it into bricks, and let them dry in the sun. These mud bricks were strong. Walls made of mud brick could stand for many years. In a place called Jericho in the Middle East, people built some of the oldest permanent houses in the world. In another place, called Çatalhöyük in what is now Turkey, people built their houses so close together that there were no streets. They walked on the rooftops and entered their homes through a hole in the roof. Inside these early homes, there were simple ovens for cooking, places to store food, and areas for sleeping. A house was no longer just a place to hide from the cold. It was a place to keep your food, your tools, your seeds for the next season. It was a place for your future. The house had become something more than shelter. It had become a home. And as these villages grew, something even bigger began to appear on the horizon. Villages grew larger. More people came. Families became communities, and communities became towns. And then, for the first time in history, towns became cities. In a region called Mesopotamia, between two great rivers, one of the first cities in the world appeared. Its name was Uruk. In Uruk, there were not just houses. There were temples, markets, and wide streets. People worked different jobs. Some made pots. Some made cloth. Some traded goods with people from far away. Houses in these early cities were made of mud brick like before, but they were better. They were larger. Some had more than one room. Some had courtyards where families could sit together under the sky. Then, far away in Egypt, people built houses to survive the desert heat. Their walls were thick to keep the inside cool. Their roofs were flat. And not far from there, a civilization was growing that would change the way people thought about houses forever. The ancient Romans built homes that were truly remarkable. Rich families lived in large, beautiful houses called a domus. A domus had an open area in the center with rooms all around it. The floors were covered in beautiful colored tiles called mosaics. The walls were painted with bright pictures. Water flowed through small channels inside the home. But not everyone in Rome lived like this. Many ordinary people lived in tall buildings called insulae. These were like the apartment buildings we know today. They were 5 or 6 floors high, made of wood and brick, and sometimes they were not very safe. Life was different depending on who you were and how much money you had. Some things, it seems, have not changed very much at all. But what happened when the great Roman world came to an end? After the fall of Rome, Europe entered a long and difficult period. Wars were common. Life was dangerous, and the way people built their houses reflected this new reality. The rich and powerful built castles. These were not just homes, they were fortresses, made of heavy stone, built on high hills, surrounded by thick walls and deep water called moats. A castle was designed to protect the people inside from attack. The walls were tall, the doors were strong. Small windows let in very little light, but they made it hard for enemies to enter. Inside, life in a castle was cold, dark, and not very comfortable by our standards today. But it was safe, and in those times, safety was the most important thing of all. Around the castles, ordinary people lived in much simpler homes. These were small cottages built with wood, mud, and straw. The roofs were made of thatch, which is dried grass bundled together. Inside, there was often just one room. The family cooked, ate, and slept in the same space. Animals sometimes lived in the house too, sharing warmth with the family during the cold winters. There were no glass windows. There was no running water. Life was simple and often hard, but people made the best of what they had. They decorated their homes with small things. They kept their fires burning. They told stories in the evening light. A house did not need to be grand to be full of love. And slowly, very slowly, the world began to change again. New ideas were coming. A new age was about to begin, and it would bring light, beauty, and something very powerful to the story of houses. After the long, cold years of the Middle Ages, a new time arrived in Europe. People call this time the Renaissance, which means rebirth. It was a time of art, science, and fresh ideas, and these new ideas changed houses too. Architects, the people who design buildings, began to think about beauty. They studied the old buildings of Greece and Rome. They wanted their houses to be not just strong, but also beautiful. Homes for the wealthy began to have large windows that let in sunlight. Rooms were bigger, ceilings were higher, Walls were painted with beautiful art. Gardens surrounded the houses with flowers and fountains. For the first time, a house was something to admire, something to enjoy, not just something to protect you. Then came another great change, the Industrial Revolution. This was a time when machines changed the way people worked and lived. Factories opened in cities. People left the countryside and moved to the cities to find work. Cities grew fast, very fast, and they needed houses, lots of houses, quickly. Builders made long rows of houses, all connected together, all looking the same. These were called terraced houses. In some cities, tall apartment buildings went up, floor after floor. For the first time, homes had running water inside. They had gas for light and heat. Later, they had electricity. A house became brighter. A house became warmer. Life inside a home became easier. Think about that for a moment. For thousands of years, people lived without light at the touch of a button, without water from a tap, without heat from a switch on the wall. These things that we use every day without thinking, they are very new in the long story of houses. And the story did not stop there. The 20th century brought even more changes, and the house continued its quiet, steady journey into the world we know today. Today, houses come in many shapes and sizes. There are small apartments in busy cities. There are large homes in quiet countryside. There are tiny houses built to use less space and less energy. There are houses with computers inside the walls that can turn on the lights, close the curtains, and even lock the doors, all by themselves. We have come so far from those first caves, so far from those simple huts of branches and bones. The journey of houses is really the journey of people. Every time people learned something new, their houses changed. When they learned to use fire, caves became homes. When they learned to farm, villages were born. When they learned to build with brick and stone, cities grew. When they learned about art, homes became beautiful. When machines arrived, homes became comfortable. Each step was a small discovery. Each discovery made life a little better, a little safer, a little more human. And here is the quiet lesson of this story. A house is made of walls and a roof and a floor. But a home, a real home, is made of something else. It is made of the people inside. It is made of warmth, of safety, of the feeling that you belong somewhere. That has been true since the very first cave, and it is still true today. Now, my friend, I want to say something to you, not as a storyteller, but as someone who is walking this journey with you. You are here, listening to this story in English, and that is something beautiful. Every word you understand, every sentence you follow, that is a step forward on your own journey. Learning English is like building a house. You start with small pieces, one word, then another, one sentence, then another, and slowly you build something strong, something that is yours. So keep going, keep listening, keep learning. And if this story gave you a quiet moment of peace today, if it helped you learn even one new word or feel a little more confident with English, then come back again. There are more stories waiting for you here at Storyline English. Leave a word in the comments. Tell me what story you would like to hear next, and I will be here, ready, with another journey for us to take together. Until next time, take care of yourself, and remember, you are building something wonderful, one word at a time.